This week on the MovementRVA Podcast, we bring you part one of a two-part series with Patton Gleason, perennial entrepreneur and owner of Thrivent, and we talk about the small habits that lead to big successes. We have formed a super tribe with Koyos. What is Koyos? Koyos is a nootropic that enhances cognitive function. That means if you use your brain to make money, or you use your brain in general, Koyos will help you use it more effectively. I use Koyos, Jake uses Koyos, lots of people at CrossFit RVA use Koyos, and we now have a sponsorship with them where you get 25% off if you use the code RVA when you go to purchase at their website. That is RVA. So go to www.mentaltitan.com, purchase your Koyos today, use our code, get 25% off. I don't like doing this that much, but if you like the show, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you think we're really awesome, go to iTunes, give us a review. 5 stars is the best we can get, but we're honestly happy with anything that happens. So, do it now, and enjoy the show.
Do you want to talk for a minute or you want to just get started?
I feel warm. Do you feel warm?
You feel warmed up?
Do you feel warm?
I'm warm.
Warm physically and mentally warmed up.
Like a salty hot bath.
Which we take.
We went to a float tank.
Have you heard of that?
No.
It's more weird stuff that I would not have embarked on if not for this podcast. There's this thing where it's a small chamber. It would fit in this room, and you float.
Chamber.
Well, I mean, I think
Sounds
that's
like a torture chamber.
It's a small pod.
Yeah.
We're about less than a foot of water.
Yeah, 10 inches.
There's 800 pounds of Epsom salt dissolved into this small amount of water, so you
Really?
float in a foot of water, like without any.
Like the Dead Sea.
Yes, exactly like the Dead Sea. They warm the water up to your skin temperature. And then everything is soundproof, and they turn off the lights. So you can't feel anything, you can't see anything, you can't hear anything, and you sit there for 90 minutes.
This podcast is a method for me to do all the weird things I want to do.
And so is it like a meditation practice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is outstanding. Is that here in Richmond?
Charlottesville.
Yeah.
But it's about to be in Richmond, maybe in
There's
2
a
different
rumor.
spots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And then do they drain the water after every time?
No, it's like a pool filter. Like there's they filter all the water every single time, and then it's like
Got it.
there's enough various chemicals in it to, I think, kill anything. But yeah, it was pretty wild.
That is outstanding. So is it something you do again?
Yeah, some people do it routinely. I would do it again.
I would do it every day if I could. Not even kidding.
Just like
Really?
you wake up, you have breakfast, you
Go
float
in the
for
float.
90 minutes.
Yep, and then just come out and go on my day. It's
Really?
outstanding.
Felt insane.
That's and so was it the idea of floating that was so good, or was it really that forced meditation, that really forced completely quiet? I mean, when was the last time that outside of you sleeping that you had no phone, no stimuli, no distraction?
Well, yeah, and on top of that is you've never been weightless in your life.
No.
So you've never not used your muscles to stabilize or to just sense what was around you. I think it was the sensory deprivation part that just plunged you. And we have had we only went once. We've had friends that have gone twice.
Yeah.
And they hallucinated the second time.
Really?
Because their brain is just churning, but not in like a stressful way.
It's like it doesn't know what to do without all the input,
Yeah.
you know?
Really, really interesting. It'd be, if you had I think it'd be just a really interesting place to meditate. Like, so, and which is something like over the last year or so that I've tried to get more into. I think it's probably becoming a little bit more. I initially thought it was, probably a little far out for
Me too.
For me.
Yeah.
A little new agey.
Yeah, a lot new agey, but so it's been a practice. But I think it'd be really interesting if you went into it having never, whether it was no kind of mind awareness, no meditation practice, and went into it. But if you were somebody who had a little bit of knowledge on being able to quiet down your mind and tune into your body and tune into your breathing just a little bit more, what the difference between the experiences would be.
Well, what's crazy is the guy that owns it, he was a pharmacist for 30 years. Got fed up with big pharma, found floating, found that it had a profound impact, not just mental health, but physical health. And he tried to meditate terrestrially. This is what he calls it. And he couldn't. But now he'll float. He floats all night sometimes. Gets in there when the place closes and gets out when it opens.
Which just seems insane.
That I couldn't even imagine that. That's 8-9 hours of being in there. But he says he is completely, that quieting of the mind is like full and like for hours and hours and hours.
It's like a little kickstart for meditation.
That's outstanding. Well, the monks or people who had studied in Japan or in Nepal, like kind of really Buddhist monks, their training is 8 to 10 hours a day of meditation.
Yeah.
And, I can't imagine, like right now I can't be like being very still for that long. Seems completely really almost unattainable. In a previous life, I guided professionally for a number of years, so a lot of backpacking and mountaineering trips, and so where you have no external stimuli in terms of like phones or headphones or music or any of that kind of stuff. You're in these very quiet, completely removed from any artificial noise places, and because you have a big backpack on, you kind of have this neutralizing factor of, well, I can't really go much faster, so I don't even have the option to run. It's like I have to stay in this same rhythm for extended, periods of time, and that's probably maybe the closest to like an extended meditation.
Yeah. I found that in the military rucking, especially like really long ones, which same thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
When you would finally hit the pace, and I would just zone out, and it'd be 3-4 miles later, and the pain and all that would just drop out, and because you'd just be on that one like train of thought. Yeah, and that's probably in addition to that's probably a really big part of the value to doing those longer rucks is being able to think about or do one thing and focus on one thing for an extended amount of time, and in which it's so easy to be distracted or pulled into a bunch of different directions. So that idea of kind of training yourself to stay focused and do kind of one thing at a time is it's got to be invaluable. Have you guys heard of Wim Hof?
No, I have no idea what that is.
I think I heard about that on Tim Ferriss's podcast.
Okay, so I heard it on Tim Ferriss's podcast too. Googled it, YouTube Vice video. He's a guy. He's Dutch. He, I want to say he's about 60-ish years old. Looks like he's 40.
Yeah. His
meditation practice is something I've never seen before, and he had a Guinness Book of World Records feat for getting in an ice bath for like 2 hours, not getting hypothermia. He did a bunch of other things. He climbed Mount Everest without shirt on. He ran a marathon in Namibia.
What is that?
Some random African country that I can't pronounce.
There's a Namibia?
Namibia.
Say it one more time.
Namibia.
Okay. And he ran it without drinking water. And scientists were pretty much... do you hear that music?
I guess it is what it is.
Yeah. Scientists wanted to study it, and they wanted to reproduce in a laboratory.
Yeah.
And they reproduced all of those. And in addition to that, they injected him with, not a neurotoxin, but some sort of biologically active element that makes everyone else reacts to it. They get a fever, they get sick, so on and so forth. They injected him with it, and he didn't. And he just meditated the entire time. So you should check it out. It's like 20 minutes long. It's really good.
It's on Vice.
It's on Vice.
Check it out.
That's the level I'm trying to get to in the meditation.
Just freezing yourself in ice bath.
I want the bubonic plague, and I just...
Your body rejects it.
I'm running for like miles.
Yeah.
Bleeding out of the eyes, but I don't care.
Good.
Check, are we on now?
We've been on. We're just
You should put that
rolling.
in the beginning.
It's available. We have the technology.
Yeah.
We have the audio.
Welcome back, everybody, to MovementRVA Podcast Epsiode 22. We are joined by Patton Gleason, perennial entrepreneur, owner of Thrivident. Say that right?
Yeah, it's perfect.
And a endurance coach athlete of many, many years in the game. What's up, Patton?
Matt, what's shaking? Jake,
How's it going?
dude, it's going great, man. I'm so psyched to be here. This is really cool.
Yeah, we're excited. It's good. I know we've been talking about it for a while because I told you about the podcast probably like episode 2.
Yeah, you guys had just gotten started, and so it's exciting to see that. I mean, this far, and then I think a bunch of people talk about doing a podcast or starting a project or business or anything like that. So having 22 in and doing it consistently is really exciting.
I'd just be embarrassed to quit out of nowhere. I feel like this is only posterity is the only thing keeping you going.
That's it. That's the only thing that's
Just
motivating us. It's embarrassment, the fear of shame and humiliation.
Yeah, that's it.
I was having this conversation with somebody a few weeks ago, and we were talking about qualities of kind of leadership or what makes really successful people. And not that at any time I possess or master any of those, but I came to the conclusion one of my better qualities is I'm just hard to kill.
That's the best quality to have.
You're persistent.
Yeah.
Like a cockroach.
That's exactly
Keep going.
Post-nuclear
Keep going.
war.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I couldn't figure out if that was a good, in times in which, whether it was an event or an experience that, logically you probably should have quit or thrown in the towel. And I think we're seeing more and more data on that idea of that persistence and very gradual progress, and not always looking for a home run, and being able to withstand kind of challenging times or events. Those are some of the big kind of metrics to whether it's a better life or success or whatever that looks like.
I remember hearing another podcast talk about their success, and they were joking around that said it was an overnight success story that took 5 years to happen, so it like looks like it was just suddenly, you have achieved this great level of success, but really it was probably many, many failures along the way to get you there.
I read a great book recently called The Obstacles Away by a guy named Ryan Holiday. And I think he was either the CMO or some executive position with American Apparel. And this book is about it's kind of this stoic philosophy, but in a more modern day application. And you can only read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius so often, and it doesn't have quite a day-to-day principle. And the whole premise of this book was when crappy or challenging things happen to you, that doesn't make you unique or a victim under any circumstances, because that's just life. What does make you unique and empowered is how you perceive and respond to it. And even when things are crappy and hard, and then he associates it with, if we look at great military leaders, great, very accomplished business people or athletes, there was nobody who had kind of this entire path with a silver spoon in their mouth.
Yeah. You ever seen the chart? It's almost an internet meme, but it's like the path to success. And it's like what people think it is, and it's just basically like a straight up climb, and then what it actually is, and it's like almost a sine wave just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, up and down. I think that's we've been talking about that a lot. We've been calling it, or I've been calling it on the podcast, the long swim. Yeah. How it's just a very, very long swim to get from where you are to where you want to be.
Yeah, I like it.
You were starting to talk before we actually turned on the recorder about fitness podcasts.
Yeah.
And I don't think we fall in that category so much, other than it's one facet of what this is.
We're a podcast for people who enjoy fitness.
Okay.
But not a fitness podcast.
That's like a Zen koan right there.
Whatever it means to you.
Whatever it means to you is the truth. But one thing I thought was interesting that you said was the rah-rah aspect.
Yeah.
You don't find that particularly appealing.
So not only not appealing, but I think it ends up being completely counterproductive. only taking a step or only wanting to make start a business, run, lift, do CrossFit, if you're only wanting to do that when the iron is hot and when you're super wound up and motivated, becomes impossible to maintain that. So to maintain, it's, well, I only want to be healthy when I'm feeling really good. Well, that is a complete recipe for disaster. I think if you listen to a lot of, I mean, even if it's speakers or coaches or trainers, it's all really this rah based. And not necessarily very realistic or purpose-driven. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, what makes more sense in ways to develop those really good habits and get into it where I find value is what's the purpose behind it, and what's a really good process, and what are realistic expectations.
Right.
So rather than, hey, we'll throw you in the box and then we're going to put you on paleo in 90 days, you're going to be ripped, is completely unrealistic. And so having a plan or strategy that's like, hey, guess what? Life is going to come up and you're going to try to attend every single 6 a.m. session. And at some point you are going to get completely burned out. And that's just the way it goes. So having kind of plans and processes in place. My dad was an engineer. And so I also don't like just analogies. Like, give me data. Tell me, if you're going to tell me that it works, tell me why it works. Right. Why does this work? Why does this make sense? And compared to what the other alternatives to maybe achieve the same objective, why is this the best one to do?
Jake, you look like you want to say something.
I don't. I'm good. Do you have something to say?
I always have something to
always.
say. What is particularly interesting to me about that is the... I get fed up with the inspirational Instagram sort of,
like the overly positive.
Yeah,
it's like addiction to positivity.
Because you said yes, that's actually a good way to put it. Addiction to positivity, and how though that looks really good, if you examine all sides of it, it could be very detrimental to your progress. Mm-hmm. Because having a purpose, what happens when your purpose changes?
Yeah.
What happens when you realize what you thought you wanted is not exactly what you wanted? I mean, there's just so many different. It's like the chart. Like success is constant up and down, up and down, up and down. There's no ability to adjust at that point. And like, I don't know if you could speak on this, but like, how do you think about building in adjustment to your overall goal and your drive towards whatever it is you're trying to achieve?
So I think if we take a step back, I think what we see, not what we see, but if you look at kind of very success metrics, the purpose doesn't change. Now maybe the outcome you were seeking or how you get there, that's one of those things that may not necessarily change. And so if you were to take, I'm sure when you guys started CrossFit RVA, the idea of owning a Superfit Games wasn't on the immediate radar.
Absolutely not. Yeah,
but
we didn't even want to have a business. We were like, this is like some bros right. Working out, you know?
Right. But you get the right people on board and you have a kind of a common purpose and shared values. And then it's like, hey, well, we have these people on board for our purpose now to deliver an exceptional health and fitness related experience. This facility is the best way for us to do that. And then as opportunities come up, or maybe the market didn't want it, or maybe even your own interest or passion for it died down, doesn't mean that helping people have great fitness-oriented experiences and introducing that in their life wasn't what you wanted to do or be a part of. Theirs may have been a better vehicle for it. So I think you have your purpose and your values. Those maybe should grow, but shouldn't really change a whole. That shouldn't change a whole bunch. Because if you're, as partners, if your values all of a sudden changed a great deal, it's just a recipe for disaster. Now, you may have different interests, but I think in terms of how do we look at other opportunities or stay kind of somewhat nimble and flexible, a big component of that is letting the ego piece go. Because sometimes it's like, this was my idea and I'm going to see it through if it kills me or anybody else around, and being able to let go of that someone. So if you know what your kind of end common purpose is, and if how you're delivering that doesn't work out, okay, great.
One thing I think about a lot is how in the early part of the 20th century, when cars were just being invented, how many horse and buggy companies thought, oh, we just make horse and buggies. Instead of saying we transport people and goods from point A to point B, it doesn't matter how we do it.
Right.
And evolving into cars are the new thing. We're going to do cars.
Yeah.
Sure, there's a lot of train companies that can probably feel about the same way.
Right. Trains and when not switching to airplanes or trucks. I actually think about that analogy a lot because I think about how it could apply to tons of things in my life.
Yeah.
Like, figure out what your big principle is. Like, what do you do overall? And then be nimble and agile enough to adjust your methods to get to your ends.
Yeah, because your why doesn't really change. It's just like the outcome there.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And it's, so if you were going to train at a really high level, or you were going to do an ultra or start a business, you have to have, there's an ego component that's there that feels good to do something that's really good and challenging. And so having that fine balance of not letting that be so overwhelming, or the primary driving factor is a balancing act. And that comes from having I think having a good network, being internally very accountable, things like self-awareness help a whole bunch, and having a partner or a group who can also call you on your shit. Those kind of things are invaluable because there's no shortage of, especially if you've had somewhat amount of success or you're a charismatic guy, people are all, oh man, that's great. That sounds like a really great idea. And having people who can tell you the truth, whether it's comfortable or not, it's almost a lost art.
I agree. No, don't surround yourself with yes men. That's what they need to know.
I feel like as a business owner, it's been easy to measure my success only by the money coming in and using that. It's like a metric, but not just the only thing. So I think it's been, challenging for me to look at, say, like, how does the business stuff fit into the broader kind of scope of my life? Like, why do I want to have a business? What is my business? What are they looking to achieve? And it's not the money necessarily. That's just sort of like a byproduct or whatnot. But it's so easy to just look and say, well, hey, the money went up, it went down this month, whatever, which can be very sort of stressful and, again, get you focused on the wrong aspects, like the wrong parts of the achievement. But really, I think as we're talking about this, I'm just thinking, well, if you, again, bring it back to, why do you have a gym? Why do you have a competition series? Why do we have a podcast? Because this, of course, doesn't make money. But, I think it makes it easier to sort of focus on the more important things there.
Yeah. I think terms like purpose or values have got kind of a certain stigma about them, is that they're too soft to be thinking about all the time. And so a way that I'll pose this question to people is what's your superpower? And it may be that, I'm really great at creating experiences for people, or I can see greatness in someone that they may not be able to see in themselves, something along those lines. And in terms of if you can attach your wagon to, God, that's that thing, that's what I do really good, that really gets me fired up. And my vehicle for doing it is a gym, is a company, is a podcast. I think sometimes how we think about it in the context of it really makes a big difference.
I've heard that superpower be called unique genius, and the idea that you should find what your unique genius is and grow, expand it, and work within it as much as possible.
Yeah. And
if you have a company, a enterprise, whatever you have, if you need other capabilities or skills filled, you find those people that have that as their unique genius, put them in the slot, and then magic should happen.
So you've had to think about what your unique genius is, right? Your superpower.
Yeah.
What is it?
Mine, and maybe a little bit of a kind of, why I'm maybe quick to answer that is I had a consulting gig that I did a few months ago that ended up being it was very different than what I'd originally expected it to, than what I'd expected to be. Ended up not being a really good fit. Culturally wasn't very good. It just wasn't a very good match. And I knew that I was in a spot where I needed to take immediate action when somebody asked me what values were really, really important to me. And those are things I authentically really like talking about. And I couldn't do it offhand. I was like, I am too busy and fried to even think about like I'm so concerned about just surviving and not having this thing completely implode that the idea of thinking about values and purpose seemed almost frivolous, and ended up being a very good kind of maybe recentering for me. So mine is recognizing greatness in people they may not do for themselves, and then being able to authentically mirror that and be really excited about it. So, on a personal side, everybody's got things that they may be insecure about, they don't love, they're not really great and confident about. And if I sense those things, I make mention of those things and authentically identify why that's something that I think is a great attribute or something they should be proud of or not ashamed of. I have been accused more than once of being kind of overly positive and overly optimistic. What I can say is that same accusation has been going on for 36 years. So that kind of excitement or enthusiasm for people or businesses or whatever the case may be is 100% authentic, because it's something that I wouldn't even know how to fake.
I feel like that's has to be great quality for someone, for an employer or a business partner. I mean, in terms of your personal relationships with people and helping, again, get them in the right place and work with them in the best way possible.
Yeah, it can be when I'm in really good space and when I'm good and when I'm really sharp. And I think everybody goes through ebbs and flows where you sometimes do really good at it and you feel really good and really confident, and other times when life catches up with you and you do a really poor job of responding or perceiving. And those are times when I haven't done those things really, really well. I do feel like I work on being more aware of it, and the times that I've gotten away from it was when certain habits or practices that I had to stay more self-aware and make sure I was really in tune with those things. Those times in which I got out of those practices considerably. And for me, if my superpower is being able to recognize and act on those things and really bring people up.
I think we just got like a fan or something turned on and made the AC.
My thing cut out.
Oh.
No, we're fine. Keep going. Sorry, Patton.
No.
It's fine. Actually, there was something it's interesting that you said that, because I wanted to return. You're talking about internal accountability. Mm-hmm. And before, we might have recorded it, I don't know, but we were talking about meditation.
Yeah.
And you had started to do it.
Yeah.
And anyone that's listening to this podcast knows that I have started it basically because I wanted to prove that it was bullshit.
Yeah.
But it's not. So what's your practice like now? What are you using?
So my practice now is to do it very first thing in the morning. So my routine is I will, before I go to bed at night, I'll have a couple things that I'll write down, and they may be values that I'm working on or I want to be more aware of, or gratitudes that I'm working on. And so with the idea being, if that's kind of the last thing that enters my mind when I wake up, rather than checking my phone, checking email, kind of having that internal to-do list. I mean, really before my feet hit the floor, I really try to have that kind of that last thing I was thinking about be the first thing that comes back. I will come downstairs in our home, and I'll make kind of this coffee routine. I have a bit of that, and before I jump into any readings or meditation, I will do a kettlebell Tabata. So 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off with 10 sets in there. It's not kind of the extent of the workout that I do that day, but it is a really good breathing primer. Mm-hmm. So my heart rate is up a bit. I know that if I'm going to swing a kettlebell good, my posture has to be really good. You have to be proud when you're doing it. So my heart rate is up just enough, and it's not like I have to go out and do a 30-minute run. So if I can dedicate 5 minutes of essentially priming, getting focused and getting ready. That seems to be really effective for me. And then I'll have something that I'll be reading in a 5 to 10 minute, and I'll measure it in 5 to 10 minutes. And not me in search for meaning. I'm trying to think what so right now I'm reading As a Man Thinketh. Again.
Who's that by?
Gosh. The name at this second slips me before we end. I'll have to look at it. But it's it's a classic text, and the idea is, your kind of thoughts and thought process is you're solely accountable to that. And so when just making sure you're in a good, right frame of mind, but it's things along that kind of nature. I may read, and then I'll do just a 10-minute meditation where our house happens to overlook a big green space, and I work on sitting and being still, and rather than trying to prevent getting distracted or anything coming to my mind, recognizing it, and then trying to refocus in. And sometimes with success, sometimes I have a really great session. I'm like, man, I am ready to flip and crush it today. Get ready, world. And other times, I'll check my watch and make sure, kind of that. I really commit to the 10 minutes. So like once I've made a decision, if I have to suffer through it, then I suffer through it. But I really try to commit to it. And sometimes I just have distractions or things where I know were really pressing that I felt like I had to get to. But for me, that when it's really consistent, I feel really, really dialed, and almost without fail, if I'm not dedicating that time to being in good space, both mentally and physically, if I look at times in which I'd had lots of personal challenges, it was always when I was like, I'm too busy or I'm too fried to even think about doing something along those lines.
So when you do those things, though, you feel like you're much more able to handle all the tasks of the day and the challenges ahead and stuff.
Yeah, I think it is. So I think it's one, being able to prioritize. Mm-hmm. And so one, it's prioritize, and the other one is making sure that that I'm getting out of my own way a little bit. So I really think a lot about like being very conscious of humility.
That's what I find it does for me too.
Yeah. The only thing worse than being wrong is having that I'm wrong or that I made a bad decision. I have Superman complex is something I really, really, really try to work on and be aware of.
Yeah.
So you can't just have like one power session and everything fixes it, and that's not to say that by any means do I have any kind of mastery, any expert level. For me, I go, gosh, okay, when was I really strong or really dialed? Or when did I, feel like I was the best version of myself? And having that practice be, kind of a mixture of my breathing's right, my heart rate's a little bit elevated, a good meditation practice, and then reading something that is kind of along the personal development lines, something that's a bit more growth oriented. Sure seems to be way more effective than waking up, checking email, looking at Twitter, checking out CNN, and then letting the day control me rather than me controlling the day.
Yeah, that's, of course it's its own addiction. You fill your day up with small tasks that really aren't particularly important. And when it gets right down to it, they're maybe not taking you any specific direction. I'll sit at a computer and it's nothing for me to like just not get up all day and find something to do, and I have my 2 monitors and 50 tabs open on both monitor, and I'm like just bouncing around from thing to thing and really not being particularly productive or even doing things I really have to be doing. It's like you invent things, you invent busyness in your life, so you really don't have to sit there and think about the other things. Or like, it's a problem. Yeah,
this busyness is a badge of honor bullshit. Like, oh, hey, how's your day? Oh, I'm so busy.
Yeah, that's
really.
I hate that. Drives me nuts.
Really? You have access to the greatest technology in the entire world, and access to help and support on a level that is never in the history of man well, I'm so busy as a badge of honor is one. I'm certainly guilty of saying that, of having that be the first thing that comes out. But you know what I'd really like to hear people say is, "Oh, was really productive today.
Yeah.
I got a lot done and I really knocked it out." And one of my readings a few weeks ago was this great book called Essentialism. And he talks about until the beginning of the 20th century, that priority was not multiples. That the word priorities even came into the vernacular. So priority, it's not, you can't have multiple things that are the most important. You have a priority.
Right, singular.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. And that was that book came at a really good time when I could feel I was not as productive as I would like to be, and Essentialism was a great book.
Well, you talked about this before, the whole doing one thing at one time very well.
Yeah.
I found that meditation for me, because concentrate on the breath, and I use Headspace. I don't know if you know that app. It's like a guided meditation. I found it to be really useful. But it takes the same vein you did, because I tried to meditate sometime way back in the past, and I thought that when thoughts came into your head, you had to force them out.
Yeah.
And in Headspace, it's like, no, don't force them out. Let them come, then let them go as quickly as they came.
Yeah.
So I found that I meditate between 10 and 20 minutes a day. When you get into the day, those 50 tabs, you kind of just disregard the things that aren't the most important. Yeah. And I found that's what it's done for me, is like, let me choose very quickly and well what actually matters to me and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Everyone should meditate.
It's funny how we get on things that we never planned on talking about, but that's what makes this kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, I think it's maybe you mentioned it earlier that it was a like meditation, or this idea is like a little new agey.
Yeah.
Or that we confuse personal development with like some over the top motivation, or being so overly optimistic that you're negligent to the realities of the world, and kind of really being present. And I think there's a real shame that it's not a bigger part of kind of the conversation and dialogue. I want to be a better guy today than I was yesterday, and I want to be a better guy tomorrow than I was today. And that part of that's being a better man and a better husband and a better dad. And because if I want to be great at CrossFit, then I'd find the best teachers and I'd work on it, and I would I'd read CrossFit blogs and do all that kind of stuff. And the same thing with running. Like, I'd really train and make a big, diligent effort to do it. And so, those things that can make us better people, or better versions of ourselves, it seems asinine why we wouldn't want to dedicate kind of mental and physical energy to trying to pursue those.
We call it New Age too, but it's not. Meditation's as old as Buddhism and Hinduism.
Right.
And then self-improvement is as old as the ancient world. You talked about Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
Back to the Greeks and Socrates, where developing virtue, figuring out what virtue was, and then developing virtue was the main aim of people's lives beyond mere survival.
Yeah.
So it's not New Age. It's just, I guess what bothers me and probably bothers Jake is when it's repackaged with the rah-rah aspect, and then the monetary gain that goes along with things that at some point were given away for free or relatively free. That's the part. When virtue becomes self-help, and self-help becomes probably $1 billion industry, that's when it bothers me.
Yeah. You can't buy your way to virtue. It's like, well, I bought this book and everything. Oh,
yeah.
That might have been a gateway. And even reading it is still not that's not action.
Right.
That's not a practical application. And it's the same thing with running or cross or anything else, or backpacking. Oh, well, I bought a bunch of maps and some sweet gear. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, have you gone out yet?
Get your ass outside. Yeah. Go have some experiences.
Experiences you probably could have had without the backpack or the maps.
Exactly right. So, and that's in that same line of like personal accountability, and something for me that I really believe, empowerment, and not in an overly rah-rah way, but can you teach somebody in a way that something that they wanted to learn or do, they had the skill set to be able to do it in a skill set enough that they knew when an appropriate time to ask for help was.
We were talking about that last week.
What's that?
Which is kind of congruent with the train analogy.
I don't remember last week, man.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you what we said. Maybe 2 weeks ago. Talking about how horse and buggy should recognize that they don't make horse and buggies. They transport people. You said that the gym and the way you look at it is you give people capability. So if someone couldn't do a pull-up, pull their body weight over something, or a push-up, that's what you do.
And also the confidence that it brings to know that you are...
empowerment.
Yes, you are capable in the, I guess, physical and mental world here. Yeah. You can do the things that you maybe couldn't do before. And again, it allows you to do much more in your life.
It seems... talking about like Tim Ferriss and we were talking about that before we turned on the recorder.
We might have caught it. I don't know.
Maybe we caught it. That this aspect of developing virtue, of stilling the mind, of self-improvement, is something a lot of the highest level entrepreneurs are doing. How has it helped you be an entrepreneur? And do you think that obviously you have to do this concurrently because you can't spend all your time in preparation buying the backpack and the maps and never start a business. Right. But I mean, from your experience, how do you kind of mesh those two things so that they're going in the same direction?
So it was not a practice even remotely I applied years ago in well, that's really funny. It wasn't a practice I applied years ago under any circumstances of very acutely super high accountability, prioritizing what it was, being really connected to your purpose, not your ideals or not whatever your idea was. That was something I did not do didn't do it all or didn't do very well, and was part of a number of projects that fizzled out, that didn't have nearly the success that they possibly could have done. And so I think a meditation or personal development component, for me, it really came after getting my ass kicked pretty solidly and not wanting that to happen and trying to find out for somebody who feels pretty capable and competent, what was it that went wrong, and then what can we do to make sure that does not happen again.
What was your first step towards actually being an entrepreneur? Like, what was, if you could go back to, like, I don't know, cutting your first grass with your best friend or whatnot, like, what was your first business there, and how did you move on?
So for me, I didn't even know the word entrepreneur until I was out of college. Mm-hmm. I went to school in the late 90s, and so the idea was, like, you go there, you're there for 4 years, you do something pretty generic, and then you go get a job working for a corporation. The idea of having a skill set or that being really ingrained in the community, particularly, and I grew up in Texas, was not a big part of the dialogue. And so I had grandparents they'd owned their own business for a number of years. My dad had his own business, but that kind of concept of, you heard of small business or family-owned business, but like entrepreneurship and how to start, like where square one is, wasn't really a big part of the vernacular. And so as I went through school and I got out of it, I had a really hard time getting super excited about working really hard for 4 years and then going and working for somebody else. Like, I couldn't.
I feel like Matt and I probably had very similar experiences. I mean, that was as we were getting done with our degrees and stuff like that. I mean, if it wasn't for the gym, I don't know what I would have done. And Matt kind of floated around for a little bit before he joined the military.
Yeah.
So it was, I guess, again, a similar thing.
Worked for a senator.
Yeah.
It was horrible. I worked in Washington, D.C., and it was horrible.
But again, we did the 4-year thing, and it was not like, it was like, you're going to do this, you're going to get your job, and then that was it, I mean, that was really the expectation for a while until you decide you're going to join the military.
Yeah.
And I just happened to get the gym going, so.
But I was like you, I knew I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be stuck in a building all day and not see the sunlight.
What do we call them? Penguins?
Yeah, I didn't want to put on my
suit.
I didn't want to dress up like a penguin and work for someone else.
But totally okay for our listeners who are wearing suits right now.
You guys do what you want. I'm just talking about me specifically. Yeah, I was just like you. So then how did you, because there was no path back then.
There was no path in particular. I think it was in certain parts of the country. We were also kind of the last time that we'd had any substantial recession had been in the mid 80s, and so things have been going really good for a really long time. There was lots of emerging technologies that were things like markets and those kind of things all were really, really high. So people didn't like. Yeah, I think the idea was, hey, man, things are really great. Let me just get into whether it's finance or building things or whatever the case may be. So I kept finding myself working for companies that were in their infancy, or there were projects that were just getting started. And so that was the university I went to. Their outdoor program was going under kind of a complete overhaul, and they brought in this really extraordinary guy to come head it. And for the first time in their history of the program, they were going to have student leaders. They'd always had faculty who led trips, and I was the first hire that they had. I really had no business doing it at all. And then from there, the same thing kept happening. I kept really gravitating to those things, and so we fast forward a couple years, and on the night of my 25th birthday, I just had one of those moments, kind of those epiphany moments. I'm like, okay, here's what I need to be doing. And I wrote what ultimately became a business plan. I really wanted to get into brick and mortar. I wanted to open a running store. I was like, so the business of it makes sense. I like running. The other people I know who own business like that, man, they're great. And had a good number of mentors who kind of helped to guide me in the right position. During that time, I ended up getting hired with a family-run company that was working to grow and expand their footprint. They had a couple of brick-and-mortar stores, and they were looking to open more, and that was just a great... I kind of put my ambitions on hold so I could really learn what a great way to go do it was. And so, again, we're opening new stores and developing new programs, and that ended up being really good. 4 years into that, I was really interested in technology. E-commerce was something I felt like for people who had access to really great data like this company did, you could just do very, very well. And as a brick and mortar retailer, trying to ignore how big that e-commerce was in the tech side, may not have been really great. So I put together a proposal for these guys of, hey, I think you guys, we can do something really cool here in this space, and I'd love to head it up. And they didn't want, that just wasn't what they wanted to do or focus on. And that document became a business plan for my first e-commerce company. And about that time, my wife had started a couple of smaller companies and was really working to find her footing and some things that worked and things that didn't. And so we were both going through those things at the same time. And I had a son that was, on the day that I turned in my resignation, I think he might have been a couple weeks old. Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's interesting that you got involved in companies that were, again, in their infancy, and were doing a lot of growing. Got to be some parallels to, you starting your own company.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like, especially with a new company, there's a certain creative aspect as you're figuring out, like, what is this company going to be and what's it going to look like? Right. So maybe you weren't the owner yet, but you were still a part of the process.
Absolutely.
Which I'm sure was a great period of growth for you. I mean, you could then lead into, maybe if those things hadn't happened, you wouldn't have said, hey, I'm going to start my own thing.
I think you're right. I think it would have, there's such a stigma on being completely self-dependent. And so the longer that you're in that kind of pattern and mindset of, I've always had a job that somebody else cut the paycheck for, and I've got this perceived level of stability and security, the longer you're in that, it becomes harder to even envision, me being solely accountable to a paycheck or taking care of my family or other employees can be really hard the longer you're in that. And so I was really fortunate that I got to be part of, some smaller companies, and got to see, I had no illusions of how hard it was going to be or what the work was going to take. I mean, I'd been part of that process. And then also got to see other people do it. I was like, man, if they can do it and I can help them do it, I bet I can do this.
Yeah.
And so having a little bit of that experience base was invaluable.
And so that store, that was what, Natural
Running store, yeah.
And so when did that get started?
So that was in 2010 in November.
Where is that?
No, so it was an e-commerce store.
Gotcha.
I'd worked in the running industry a long time. In an effort to be unique, be different, deliver these really great experiences, I couldn't believe nobody was thinking about like running. Nobody talked about running technique or any of that kind of stuff. And I had a kind of just prior to that, had a running injury, an IT injury that kept me out for a really like almost a year. So I cycled, and I took a swimming class. And when I got in the pool in this class, I look around and I'm in my mid 20s, and there's some other adults and everybody's kind of got some life on them, and not necessarily what
It's a nice way of putting it.
what looked like not optimal shape. I'm like, man, I'm going to murder these people in the pool, and I'm gonna be great at swimming. And I got destroyed, and it wasn't because my fitness wasn't very good, but my technique was appalling. And so people who had this phenomenal technique, maybe they swam in high school or swam in college, or it was just something that they worked on. And in this class, you wouldn't go swim 1,500 meters. You work on technique for like 2/3 of it, and you do drills that reinforce good motor patterns. And it's the same thing with golf. Most people spend some time on the driving range working on the technique piece. And as I got into cycling, it was working on things like higher cadence and body positioning. But in running, it's like, well, here's a pair of shoes, and I don't know, read Runner's World and go at it. And so that just seemed really, really silly to me. In addition to trying to get healthy and better, nothing else worked. I went to great doctors, great physical therapists. I bought lots of shoes, inserts. I had a number of people who told me that if I wanted to ever run with my kids, just give up running and take up something lower impact. And
Perfect way. We're going to segue into part 2.
All right, guys, keep an eye out for next week's episode. We're going to continue to talk with Patton. Until then, it's just exercise.